Let's end bipolar stigma in London.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Oxfordshire.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Guildford.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Northern Ireland.
Let's end bipolar stigma in France.
Let's end bipolar stigma in London.
Mae'n amser terfyn ar stigma deuddegwn yng Nghymru.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Scotland.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Kenya.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Hull.
Let's end the bipolar stigma in London.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Hampshire.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Kent.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Leicester.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Northamptonshire.
Let's end bipolar stigma in East London.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Manchester.
Let's end the bipolar stigma in Hastings.
Let's end bipolar stigma in London.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Nottingham.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Maidstone.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Essex.
Let's end bipolar stigma in London.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Dorset.
Let's end bipolar stigma in Manchester.
Let's end the bipolar stigma.
To share in the next 5 minutes just some of the feedback people have given around the experience of stigma that they've had. So we did a survey just at the start of this year where we're asking people about what their experience of stigma was, and we weren't that surprised by the findings. And I think Leah's articulated really well that people with bipolar kind of carry a double burden. You've got the burden of living with a condition, but also the burden of the way that people treat you as well, and the way that they act around you because of the condition. And that's really difficult because it really makes it harder to manage the condition. So we found that there was, from our survey, that 55% of respondents believe that stigma had improved over the last 50 years. So that's really positive. I mean, we talk about some of the challenges around mental health. And I think we should also acknowledge that there has been huge improvements over the last few years. And I must say, from my first experience with my friend who had bipolar, he had to take a lot of time out of school, where we were about 15, 16 when it happened. And all of the parents were told not to talk about it. And there was some of the kids knew, because they'd been at primary school with him, the parents knew his parents. And there was a lot of shame around that. And it was, my friend had just been off sick, like anyone had been if they'd broken their leg or anything like that. And there was this big fear about him coming back and what that meant. And no one told us that it had been bipolar. In some respects, there was a bit of an advantage that we just treated it as we found him when he came along. And we were able to have able to have some amazing times with him. But it would have been wonderful if he'd been able to come back. People had known it had been bipolar, but it hadn't been this big kind of S word, big stigma, this big bipolar world where people were too scared to talk about it, that people could have been open about it and we could have supported him better. 84% of people said that they believe that society doesn't understand the realities of living with bipolar. And this is a really important thing, isn't it? Because it's a difference between awareness and understanding as well. A lot of people will probably tell us that they don't hold any stigma towards bipolar and they're not scared of it. And there's some positive polling around that we will be showing at a later date. But understanding is very different from awareness, and often people don't understand some of the ins and outs of it and the realities of living with the condition. It's people might on the face of it be living well with it, but it often hides the real trauma that people are experiencing behind the scenes as well. 85% of people say that stigma, they feel stigma that means that people don't judge them on who they are and their abilities, that they will often they won't see the person about it, and they feel they have to work much harder to prove that they're better at their job. So that's really difficult. They have to work twice as hard and to prove themselves when they have the condition. A lot of people, because of that, are often very private about it. And when they start an employer, I know someone close who's one of their family relatives just started a new job, and they don't want to tell their employer that they've got bipolar. And there's no reason for that. They shouldn't have to tell them, but they just want to start their new job and not be judged, and be judged on what they do in their job and not by the condition. And wouldn't it be amazing if people could just tell people they're bipolar in the same way that they tell people what their commute is and how far they've had to travel in? They don't have to be scared of sharing that. And then finally, 71% of people tell us that they have avoided telling people and others about bipolar because of the symptoms. And that's really difficult, isn't it? We've got a session, I think, coming up where people are talking about relationships in bipolar. And there's no right or wrong point to tell people. It's people's diagnosis is private. You tell people when you feel that they deserve to know about it. And I think Leah's got a really good attitude that you've shared about how you'll only tell people when you feel they deserve to know, and that they stay in your life when you feel that they deserve to stay in your life. You don't have to prove anything to them. You're living an amazing life. It's difficult at times, but you're living your own life, and you have the people around you are the right people that are going to support you in living that life. So I think that's having the confidence to that's really important, and being confident in yourself. And we want so many people with bipolar. If you can get the toxic characters out of your life will improve, and it'll be easier to manage a condition as well. So that's what people have shared with us around stigma, and we exist as a charity to challenge that. So really looking forward to hearing all of the speakers that are coming up. Leah, now I'm going to hand over to your good self to be able to take us on to the next stage on our wonderful conference.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much. Now, those statistics, I don't know if they sort of open your mind if you didn't know anything like that before, or you've never heard anything like that before. Maybe it's now, again, a sticking point, a thinking point, something that you could have that conversation over the water cooler, so to speak, or over dinner with the family. Some really important points there. Thank you so much to Simon for sharing that with us. Now, stigma, as you can hear, it's riddled in all parts of life. When you have bipolar, you already go through such a hard time, and believe you me, I wasn't always like this has been a journey, let me tell you. But stigma was at the heart of so much that prevented me from getting better, and I just can't bear injustice, and I just wanted to fight it. And that's what it really came down to be honest with you. I thought, well, why should I, there was this defiance in me. I was saying, well, why should I listen to what the system says? It says that now I've got this label, I'm destined to fail. Surely that can't be right. So as you can see, stigma is a major factor that prevents people from seeking help. Now, first of all, let's dive into my panel discussions. We're going to kick off with bipolar stigma in healthcare. My first speaker is Swagata Sen, amazing woman. I spoke with her at the end of last year. We spoke about bipolar and stigma and things like this in marginalized groups. Swagata lives in London with her husband and her 5-year-old. She works for a social research company, and Swagata was diagnosed with bipolar type 2 shortly before her 30th birthday. Great birthday, I can imagine, not Paul Swagata. This was 15 years from when she first started showing symptoms. And you heard Simon say earlier, it takes an average of about 9.5 years to be correctly diagnosed with bipolar. So let's bring on Swagata. There she is. Hello, my lovely lady. How are you?
Hi, Leah. So lovely to see you again on the occasion of World Bipolar Conference Day.
It's so
like
good
a
to
really
see.
good date on my calendar now.
Yeah, I'm so
it.
glad to see you, and that you're getting involved again. It's fantastic, because I know the journey to get here, just like my own, it was certainly not easy. And how are you in terms of your health and your well-being, your mental health? You doing good at the moment where we find you?
Yeah, well, I've got news to share with all of you. We're expecting our second one in June.
I am so excited about that. That is fantastic news. Congratulations. You see, that's another stigma that cripples a lot of people, that you can't have children. You won't be a good mother or a good father. And that's untrue. You've got a thriving, growing family and a supportive husband. Congratulations. I'm so pleased to hear that. What great news.
Thank you so much, Leah. Yes, I'm a bit emotional as a result, and quite hormonal. So, it's hard to juggle that, but also like my heart is just so full. I'm so grateful. And you're right, in my own head, I'm like, I can be a good mum. I can do this. And, I've got the right kind of support and everything. So definitely.
So before I go into, I'm just going to have a quick segue because it's only fair I do that. You know, if you are pregnant and bipolar, are you getting that care? Because we're talking about the healthcare system, and I'm going to go back to your story before you were 30. But now that you're pregnant, are you getting better support than when you was before your 30s?
Oh my God, honestly. So I live in Ealing and I'm under the West London Trust. It used to be West London Mental Health Trust and now it's become just West London Trust. And they've got an amazing perinatal team. I'm registered to give birth at one of the local hospitals here in Isleworth and they're amazing. And you know, even not even like before 30, but there's such a huge positive jump in terms of prenatal care and perinatal care between my having my first and now. Like, you know, they're more on the ball. You know, they make services more available to you readily. It's definitely evolving in the right direction, which is great to see.
That is brilliant, brilliant news. You know, there's still so much work to do, and we know that, right? But, you know, I can hand on heart say that in the 14 years since I've been diagnosed, there has been a change and there are more things in place. And so it's a less, if it could be a less scarier place to be if you are diagnosed with bipolar in 2025, you know, than perhaps 15, 20 years ago. And later we're going to be speaking to Nicky Chin, a legend, I call him. He is a world-renowned music producer. He's actually got a hit in the charts at the moment. One of his old songs have come back. Bruno Mars has remixed it. And Nicky has seen it throughout all the decades because he was diagnosed at 16. So I can't wait to hear what Nicky's got to say. And Stigma, it's lasting, right? So I'm glad you're getting that care that you deserve and that you need. And that fills me with joy. So I'm really pleased about that. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Leah. I can feel the love come through the
Oh
screen.
yeah, feel it. You know what I'm like. Feel it, take it. So all right, let's now get into the nitty-gritty of this actually and get a bit serious for the moment because you know, looking at the stats, nearly half, that's 49% of people who filled in the survey that Bipolar UK did, they told us that they avoided seeing a doctor because of negative experiences of stigma. Now, for me, I knew something was wrong and nobody else around me was noticing. So I kept going to the doctor. It was them who didn't notice. But I know that there's lots of people that I speak to who won't go because of the stigma. So they won't even approach the doctor. Now, do you think that's why it took you so long to get a diagnosis? Because you were afraid of what they would think, or because you thought or you believed or experienced what I experienced, that you were being dismissed and not heard?
So, you know, Leah, I've got a very unique perspective on the stigma issue because obviously I grew up in India and I moved to the UK when I was 21. And obviously my struggles with mental health started very early on, pre-teens almost, and all of that. So I've got this unique insight into the healthcare system in India and in the UK. And you're absolutely right. When it first started, you know, I would read books and there used to be these characters who'd had schizophrenia or bipolar. And there's this, I remember I was in year 9 and I read this book and I don't remember what that book is, but there was this description of the character feeling like words used to drop out of her head like coins from her pocket with a hole in it. And I still hold on to that because for such a long time I used to feel like that, like, you know, that my mind was a sieve. My what I said was like going through a sieve, like I didn't have control almost and all that. But there was so much stigma. Bipolar mental health in India is still at a very nascent place, you know. So when I was growing up about 30 years ago, it was 25, 30 years ago, all you did if you went to a psychiatrist was you would get sleeping pills to help control all these disturbances that they would call, you know. So it would basically dumb you down. And I had absolutely no wish to be doing that. I loved school, I loved learning. So that really stopped me. I would talk to my parents, but they had no idea. They just thought that I was just a boisterous girl, you know, and they didn't get all of that. Cut to 2007 when I moved to the UK and I first saw a doctor here and then a counselor and all of that. It was pretty much the same story. Nobody would get it. And, you know, some of the stigma I've encountered is like a positive negative bias. I don't know if that's even the right term, but that's how I experienced it. Oh, but you're so articulate. Oh, but you're so well spoken. Oh, but you're so together, and
Well, but you don't look bipolar,
well, this
Swagata.
is the
That's
thing.
what I
And
get
I
the
was
most.
like,
You don't look bipolar. You look really good.
and I know nobody who's got bipolar or even diagnosed with a mental health diagnosis. I have some family members who behaved erratically, but no diagnosis. And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to look like. So I used to go into these meetings thinking, should I be crying my eyes out? Should I stage a theater of symptoms? Like, I used to get anxious about these kind of stuff. And I used to go in, and then it is probably the right thing at the time when they did it. They started investigating a whole host of physical stuff, and they scanned my brain over and over again and all of that. But I know now that the mental health investigation process should have kicked off alongside the physical process, because that then added another 10 years, to the whole process before they said, okay, everything is fine physically, let's talk about it mentally. And it started with a gentle talk around cyclothymia, which is a less severe mood disorder, and all of that. And then I still remember when I first saw the psychiatrist, and they spoke to my husband, and there was this one question he had asked: does she have 3 moods, would you say? So is it high, low, and then a standard one? And my husband was like, He couldn't nod faster than that. And like the penny dropped for all of us. And I have suspected ADHD, so I actually initially went with concerns of that, and I'm still on the waiting list 2.5 years on.
Well, we do know, just to interject, we do know that there is a link. The research Bipolar UK have done, you can find it at bipolaruk.org. They have done some fantastic research into the links between bipolar and ADHD. So there is a possibility, and it's one that I've thought of myself as well, Swagata. Now, listen, we've got to move on because we've got so much to sort of cram in. But, just to say to you that obviously 51% of people in this survey also told us that their physical health was affected because their doctor or the healthcare professional didn't actually understand their bipolar. So not only are you dealing with bipolar, but now you're dealing with physical symptoms, right? So did you ever experience that as well? I wonder.
I did. I'll be very quick with this because I'm conscious of the time as well. Sorry about that. So when I was pregnant with my first, and my psychiatrist has changed because you work so much with locum doctors who keep moving on after a year, and this guy just dismissed my bipolar diagnosis offhand. He said, you don't look bipolar. I don't think you seem bipolar. Your symptoms are not consistent with bipolar. You're too stable to be bipolar. And he caused me to cut down on my medication overnight by 300 milligrams. And 15 days later, I was in the A&E because I was so worried about my mental health and my baby. And there was this lovely A&E doctor who showed me the research and said there is no problem with continuing to take quetiapine. That's what I'm on. For the baby, there's no research that is contraindicated, so please continue with that. Don't just stop your medication. And then and then I was in such a sorry state. They were like, oh my God, you're clearly bipolar. Why have you stopped? And it was just hell during those few months when they confused it. So I've experienced a very different kind of stigma where, because I come across as very confident and well articulate, I cannot have bipolar. And so I'm often, well, not anymore, but I was denied the care that I was rightfully due because people didn't think it. So, yeah.
The thing is, right, is that it's just everything kind of links back to that stigma, doesn't it, really? It's how people think and how they view things and how they dismiss things. And it's incredibly, incredibly unfair. I was just saying, Swagata, obviously, stigma seems to lead back to so much when it comes to bipolar. And it really makes it a double-edged sword, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry of the experience that you had. It's awful, but I am so happy and so proud of you for getting through it. You are an inspiration to many women and women who may be pregnant and bipolar at the moment, and they're afraid and they're scared and they don't know what to do, or they don't know what might be coming next. But it just goes to show that you can, as long as you have the right support around you, whether within the house and within the family, and you could be a great mum and have great kids and have a great life. Oh,
Thank
so
you,
good to
Leah.
see you. You look so well. So best of luck. And we can't wait to meet the new baby. Keep us posted.
Maybe next year.
Yes. All right, then. Until then, take care, sweetheart. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Lovely, lovely ladies. Always a pleasure to speak with her. It was just so short and so quick. We've got so much to pack in, that's why. Okay, let's move on to bipolar stigma in relationships. Now, this is a big one. I could do a whole, we could just call off the conference. Let's just talk about that, shall we? Honestly, I could go on forever, but I won't. Not for now, anyway. Now, look, relationships mean platonic and romantic. There are all types of relationships to be had, right? And those interactions when people know you have bipolar often can change. It's really, really interesting to see. And like I said, back in the day when I didn't know my own value or worth, and I didn't understand what bipolar was, and I didn't know how to harness the power of it, so to speak. I wasn't who I am today, so it's interacting with people was really, really difficult. It was one of the hardest things because I've always been quite outspoken and quite forthright, and between that and disliking injustice and all the rest of it, and then people almost killing me as far as I was concerned because they weren't listening to me when I was telling them I had bipolar. So it definitely gave me a lot to sort of strive forward, because it was either do or die, sink or swim. And one day I made the decision that I was going to swim, and that's what I've been doing ever since, even though it's very, very difficult, but I do it, and I thrive with it as well. But it's taken a while to get there, and the message is that you can live well with bipolar, and that also means that you could do so in relationships too, particularly if you know yourself and you've done your healing and you've done your journey. So a bipolar diagnosis, it can have a huge impact on friendships and relationships. Let's get up that poll. Have you or a loved one experienced stigma in relationships? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. That's going to pop up on the screen. Let us know, get interactive with us. I will be showing all the results a bit later on as we go along. So there you go. It's just popped up on the screen, even for me now. I have entered yes. That's my answer. What's your answer? Now let's get on the next speaker. Dorothy Herson has a diverse background as a solicitor, as a journalist, a creative writer, and a mental health advocate. And she has diagnosis of bipolar type 1, like me. Hi, Dorothy. It's good to see you.
Hello, Leah. Great to see you.
Hi, thank you for being here. How are you doing in your bipolar journey right now? Where do I find you?
Where do you find me? I think probably at quite a good interval, because I'm sat here, not in hospital, and I'm lucid. Yeah, I'm 8 years into my journey. So I was diagnosed 8 years ago, and I guess the further down that road I go, the more I learn, the more I understand, and the better I can self-regulate. So yeah, it's better today than it has been.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, that's the thing with bipolar, isn't it? It's like the sea, it kind of waves, the peaks and the troughs. And sometimes, we're up, sometimes we're down. I think that poll has popped up again now. That's the correct poll. So have you or a loved one experienced stigma in your relationships? Yes, no, not sure. When you click on that, the results will go where it goes, and I will bring you the result a bit later on. So yeah, I guess it's riding those waves, isn't it, Dorothy? And that is part of bipolar, but obviously you're learning to manage it well. And when I was first diagnosed, I just didn't think that there were successful people in it. I just thought, oh, I've got this label now and it's over for me. And just seeing that, you've got such a diverse background, you're a solicitor. I mean, who knew that they were solicitors who had bipolar, eh? Or doctors or nurses? I mean...
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I'm not a practicing solicitor anymore. I will say that I think what I found is, although I can be kind of intellectually capable of certain positions, the sort of requirements of a 9-to-5 job or going into the office every day, I've tried it so many times, and unfortunately, I usually end up having quite a big relapse back in hospital, can't manage it. But yeah, I totally agree. I think for me, it's been finding a path that I am passionate about and that works. But seeing other women, other men who are doing well and kind of out there and being revered and respected with bipolar, it's so inspiring. There's really nothing like it.
Exactly. And although you are no longer a practicing solicitor at the moment, you still did the work to become one. So that's what I'm talking about. You put in that work, and that wouldn't have been easy. So congratulations for doing that. And you know what, actually, the strength now is recognizing, it shows how far you've come, actually, Dorothy, because you recognize that that 9 to 5 and that stress and that pressure doesn't serve you. And so you've learned exactly what to do to protect your mental health. And that's progress. That proves that you are living well with bipolar, and that's what this is all about. So congratulations.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, and I think although it is more stable, of course, when you have a diagnosis of bipolar, you kind of come to accept that there are always going to be times, seasonal shifts, traumatic events that re-trigger you. So it's not that that stuff goes away. It's not like, oh, it's all great now. It's just you've got the toolkit to manage it, and that's what I didn't have 8 years ago.
Spot on, exactly that. So digging deeper into bipolar and relationships, 67% of people who did our survey, they said that bipolar stigma has affected their ability to make or keep friendships. Has bipolar ever affected any of your friendships?
Yeah, it definitely has. I think obviously there are two things here, because on the one hand, sometimes the symptoms of bipolar can create conflict in friendships. So for example, going through a depressive period, not looking at your phone for months, and sort of dropping off the map, or being very manic and doing things that have regrettable consequences. But I think particularly with the stigma, for me, it's a sense of not being fully seen or not being myself. And kind of, I have this phrase that I often think of when I think of this as a sort of sanitizing my experiences. So people around me say, how are you doing? And I could have just been in a hospital ward, meant the crisis team could be coming out and seeing me twice a day. And I'll very often say like, oh, it's all great, it's fine. And so it's kind of being in a friendship where you're only revealing parts of yourself that you think are kind of palatable to the other people. And I think that can make you feel quite isolated and lonely, and that's been my experience often that's the stigma aspect, because it's
in terms of with friendships. I agree. And I've had the exact I share the same experiences, obviously not with all friendships, but with a few over the years. And again, I learned those things, and Simon alluded to it earlier. If you have people like that in your life, actually the strength is, you'll find once you remove certain aspects of your life, that's half the healing done, or you certainly take a big step forward. I really believe in the energy and the people you have around you, and iron sharpening iron, you know. I believe that if you have positive people around you, you remain positive. If you have Debbie Downers around you and people that are just giving off negative vibes, then that's really what is going to be your portion. And I don't believe that any of us deserve that, because we've already got bipolar, and that's hard enough. We've got to deal with that every day. I don't need a bad vibe friend on top of it. You know what I mean? So that person could go. Do you get what I mean? That when I started doing that, I became free, and I started little by little getting better and better. And that's where you see me today. So it's all a learning curve, isn't it, really?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you do become more ruthless, don't you, when you're kind of like, well, I only have a certain number of days or months in the year where I'm really stable, so I just can't really risk giving those up by being in a really dysfunctional friendship or relationship, unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah. And also, you know, you've got to bear in mind that if you're living that sort of path, then how do you ever sort of get out of it? It just goes round in a cycle, you know. You need people that are going to elevate you and not bring you down. And if that's the case, then they really don't deserve that. I think it's about protecting yourself and protecting your mental health. To me, it's a matter of life and death, because I don't want to go back to where I was. So if anyone or anything comes that can potentially, I know how my brain starts working. The minute anything that makes it go there left, I'm like, okay, that's got to go, because I've got to protect my mental health first and foremost. I have learned that I cannot love anybody else before I love myself. I cannot pour from an empty cup. And once you really understand that concept, I think that it points you towards a better place.
Yeah, I love that that saying. I love that you say it's a matter of life or death, because I think that often, you know, someone will invite me to a wedding overseas and I'll be like, okay, the flight times mean that I'm going to not sleep that night, and then I'm going to be at a wedding with loads of alcohol and stimulation. I'm very likely to have an episode and I could die, because, you know, that's what it comes to, these overdose, all these. And then yeah, I think the problem with when you've sanitized yourself because you're worried about stigma is that people only see the good, because you're only showing them the good. You're not showing them all the other stuff. So as was mentioned earlier, when you go to an appointment and they're like, you don't seem bipolar. I've definitely had that with friends where they're like, what do you mean you can't come to this or that, or the wedding, or the party? Like, you're fine. I saw you the other day and you said you're fine. And then that's when it comes back to bite you.
Honestly, it really does, because that's when you really get to see who your real friends are, right? And those who understand bipolar, and those who don't, and those who are really there for you. And, you know, if you've explained to a friend, you know what, this overstimulation, whatever, like, I really want to come to your wedding, you know, I want to be there, but honestly, I'm afraid that it's going to affect me in a certain way that you know, it's abroad, it's going to really just mess me up. I've got to make a choice, me or your wedding. You're not getting married to me. We've got to, like, I know sometimes I think very black and white and people tell me it's wrong, but it's kind of, it serves me all right so far. I'm thinking, you're not marrying me. I'm not marrying you. You're marrying your husband. You're marrying your wife. I've got to pick myself in this situation, because regardless of whether I'm at your wedding or not, your marriage is more important than whether I'm there. And it's a shame that I'm not there. I'd love to. And if there's a link, send me, I'd tune in. But on this occasion, you know, maybe I could take you for dinner when you get back, or we could do something, but you had to choose yourself. And that's, I think, is a big example, but it's a really good example that you gave there. And because there's things like that every day that friendships break down over, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why when I'm well, I will try and make the effort to kind of not compensate, but to show that love and friendship in the less conventional ways. So yeah, I won't be at the wedding, or I won't be at the hen or stag. Probably definitely won't be at the stag, but won't be at the hen. But you know, I'd love to, like, go out for tea with you and really sit and hear all about you. I'd love to be there for you when you have a baby, and I'd love to help you with the bit, you know, just showing up in other ways.
And that's the thing, you know, true friends get that. They really genuinely get it. And they will understand. And obviously we're using the wedding analogy, but there are loads of different situations. I've been in those situations. People always assume you're so outgoing. There are times where I just, you know, feel like I don't have it in me to be social in a room, and then the guilt sets in and I go, oh gosh, I should be there because it's going to make people happy. But what about me? What happens the next day when I'm burnt out because I mentally knew that I was putting myself in a situation that I couldn't handle?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. And yeah, I think, oh, there's something I was going to say just then, but it's gone. It slipped.
Oh, that happens to me all the time. So you're in the right place. We got that in common. Happens to me all the time. Except years of live TV has taught me how to pivot and get out of it when my mind's going somewhere. I quickly but trust me, I don't know what's
without
going
just
on.
saying, I've forgotten.
If it comes back to you, let me know. But I wanted to say, before we sort of wrap up, more than a third of respondents, 69%, they say that bipolar stigma has had an impact on family relationships. Was that the case for you? Like you heard earlier about my situation with my parents in the beginning, and years down the road, thankfully, it's changed. And I've spoken with my parents about it. My dad, especially, like I said, he thinks it's important that his side of the story, like, we didn't know. And this happens every day, where as parents, we just don't know, and we didn't see the signs. How were your parents and your family when you were going through your diagnosis?
I was quite fortunate because my sister already had a diagnosis before me, and my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she'd actually had it, and sadly she took her own life the year I was born. The reason that I was lucky is because that meant that my parents actually had an understanding of bipolar, which meant that they didn't shame me or get angry with me. I actually feel like I've kind of had support all the way through with them. I will say though, just because it made me think of it, that I had a partner. I know it's slightly different, but I had a partner and everything was going really well with him and he was very supportive. He knew I had bipolar and his family really liked me. And they found out I had it. I'd written an article and they found out. And it was just that was like such an example of where the stigma came in and the way that they saw me totally flipped and they wanted him to break up with me because of this. And actually them wanting him to break up with me created so many issues, and it wasn't my bipolar that was creating the issues, it was the stigma itself. And it kind of really made
because
me
you were you and they liked you before they knew about bipolar. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, and I think that so often it's actually the case that it's not the bipolar that creates all these issues in relationships and friendships. It's the other person's stigma. Either they're over-diagnosing, over-attributing things, or reducing you, or it's so often the stigma is so harmful to all the relationships that have people with this disorder in.
Yeah, you're so spot on. I want to squeeze in one more question on that before we move on, and just take a quick break, okay? 'Cause this one's really important. This is something people ask me all the time. So nearly a quarter, that's 22% of people who did the survey, said that they would only tell a new partner about their diagnosis once they're in a committed relationship. So not before, once they're in a committed relationship, however long that takes, that's when they'll tell them. And with 4% of those people saying that they will never tell a partner at all. So what impact has bipolar had on your love life? Obviously you mentioned in terms of an ex-partner's like parents and stuff, but when you get into a new relationship, when is the right time to tell the person?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't advise that people do what I've done because I think I've been single for a couple of about a year, and I have a different attitude now. In the past, I wouldn't tell the person I was seeing that I had it until months down the line. And that was just shame, a fear of how they'd respond, or it was a reaction to how people have responded in the past when I told them. I think that again can create a relationship imbalance where that they don't really know you. You're the sanitized, great, happy version of yourself, or normal version of yourself, and they haven't fallen in love with you as you are, and that's sad for them, but it's also really sad for you, or for me in this case, because you're kind of denying yourself the right to be fully loved, and that's why now I would really want to approach relationships with an openness when when it comes to bipolar. But it is easier said than done. I can say it and I can advocate it and write about it, and then in the moment I find myself kind of just fearing that they'll abandon or walk away the second that I tell them about it.
It's tough. I had somebody, who was totally into me, pretty much in love with me until the day I told them, oh, by the way, it was only a couple of weeks into meeting them, that I had bipolar, and then never heard from them again. Now, years ago, right at the beginning, when stigma crippled me in those ways, something like that would have really, really knocked me back. Actually, now, because again, I've worked on my healing and my self-worth, it's something that, first of all, I don't feel pressure to tell anyone, because again, back in the day, it was my dirty secret. So I would date people and I just wouldn't tell them. Oh my God, oh my God. But then, like you say, you're carrying this heaviness, right? And you can't be fully loved, and you can't be fully accepted, and you can't be fully seen. So that's horrible. So did away with that. And then obviously done all my self-work, healing, moving forward, and, dating as you do and meeting different people. And what I've actually learned is that, it's a bit like the housekeeping I did at the beginning of this session. I sort of get it out of the way when I feel like if they deserve to know, because I test them out first. Not everyone deserves to know our personal business, Dorothy. Do you know what I mean? So we tell them when we're ready to tell them. Okay, so when we're ready. But I personally believe sooner rather than later, and I'll tell you why. Because I believe that, as you just said, alluded to, is that it gives people the opportunity to decide. They've got a right to decide whether they want to get in a relationship with you or not. We should not be tricking anyone. And that goes for any condition. We shouldn't be holding the truth to any ailment that we might have, right? Because somebody else should have their own right to say, I can handle that, or no, I can't. I want to get into that. Well, you know what? It's not for me. And yes, that might hurt, But I prefer to know that sooner rather than later. I prefer to know that before I've fallen in love with you and then you hurt me down the road, because that can kill me. So it's really important for me that I put safeguarding in from early on. If I now tell you and you run away, I think I've gotten off lightly, right? I've gotten off lightly in the long run, because say I had a relapse or say I had a bad day, is that person going to weaponize it against me? They're going to use it against me, or worse still, what are they going to do? You know, I always say that I'm looking for someone who is a lover of my heart. So therefore they will protect who I am as a person, which means that they'll have my back. And they can only do that if I allow them to have an informed choice. So I let them know, and it sorts the wheat from the chaff. So that is my advice to you. If you really want to know who someone is, and whether that's a friend or a potential partner, let them see who you are. And ultimately, just to wrap that up, we deserve to be loved wholeheartedly. We're not bad people. We have bipolar, so what? Everyone has something, right? And if we are living well with it, then who is anyone to tell us otherwise? I just, like, who's anyone to tell me that I can't live well with it, or I don't do well with it, or to keep side-eyeing me, expecting me to have a turn at any moment? Honestly, I get that, you know, they're waiting for me now. I've told them I've got bipolar, they're waiting for me to have a turn, and that's not how it happens. And actually, if you are going to judge me, you have no place being here, not in my life, because actually I need to be the safest within my home, because the world out there, that where stigma thrives, like I said, it's a dangerous place. So within my home, within my heart, it has to be safe, because that is how I stay well and protected. So thank you, Dorothy. I hope that helps you when you're going back to your dating.
That was really, really helpful. I needed to hear that. Yeah, thank you.
Sister. All right, well, listen, it was brilliant seeing you, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thank you so much, Leah.
Take care, Dorothy. Bye. Oh, she is nice. I love that. Well, I love those sessions. I guess some of you might be thinking, well, hold on, you were supposed to be doing bipolar in the workplace. Yeah. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties there, and Jason couldn't tune in, I'm afraid. So gutted about that. But you know what? I'm going to put it out there now. I'm going to say it to Simon and to Sarah Owen, who is busy behind the scenes, that we are going to host that session. I'll personally host that session in our own time. You guys set it up. We'll host that session with Simon and the team, so that everyone can have this Stigma in the Workplace session, because it's so important. And then Bipolar UK will put it on the website for everyone to see. So I'm happy to do that. Thank you to Dorothy. Thank you to Svagata. We will be hearing back from Simon a bit later, and those poll results as well. Let's just have like a 5-minute break or so. And then when we come back, we're going to be getting into some really, really good stuff. Well, I hope the other stuff we talked about was good as well. But we're going to be talking about bipolar and the keto diet. Now, I don't know that much about this, I have to say, so I'm really intrigued. There's a really good panel coming up on that, and they're going to be discussing it among themselves, because apparently you guys have sent in so many questions, like you've inundated Bipolar UK with all of these questions about it. I'm like, do I need to get on this? I had no idea about all this stuff. So I'm going to be sat for that in about 5-10 minutes time. And then the big one, you know, world-renowned chef Heston Blumenthal. Oh gosh, to me, when I heard he had bipolar, I was kind of like, okay, because that guy is a culinary genius. Like, I remember he used to have a show on Channel 4. I used to be tuned in every week. He would recreate a different scene from a story. He once did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He created it out of food. It was a whole culinary experience. You could eat the walls and the floor and everything, like in the 1979 version of the movie. Yes, I'm old enough, people, okay? And I just thought he was fabulous, and I've been a fan ever since. And when I heard he had bipolar, and I heard all these negative stories in the press before hearing about his diagnosis, I was like, I need to hear this man's story. So I cannot wait to hear him later. He's going to be talking with Anushka Astana, who is from ITN and ITV News. She's always also a host on Peston, the political show on ITV, and her late brother, Anshu, he sadly took his life. He had bipolar. So they're going to be in conversation later, and I'm really looking forward to that as well. So remember, if you are in crisis or you're feeling overwhelmed, step out. There's support there for you. within the foyer, as you can see there in the conference hall. And also there's even a serenity room. Go and check that out. Click on that and you could be sat in front of the fireplace or watching fishes in a fish tank if you like for 5 minutes. But do come back very soon. I'll see you in a bit.